the cloud server. Oh, that's okay. So let's start. I'll share my screen. Screen 3. Share. This is wrong. Okay. Yes. Oh, let's start with takeaways. Sorry. I was just pressing this. So yeah, so welcome everyone to BFC testing and monitoring session. This won't be very detailed look at it. It will be more like high level overview, how it works, what are responsibilities, and then we will get a little bit into more details about the Postman itself. But you'll start with quite high level. Also, there's this nice thing here, which already has all the information I'm presenting here. It has step-by-step instructions, how to do anything, how to create, how anything works, how to fix, anything you want in details are here. So I will be covering just high level. Yeah, and also wanted to give a shout out to Simon, because this whole thing, regression testing with Postman, was done by me and Simon. So we wrote the documentation together, we decided how it should be done, and we just worked on it. So yeah, let's jump on the goals then. So I guess the biggest goal here is we want to run our test on production, but before we get to production. So previously we are unable to do that. Previously we would just deploy to production, and after it's deployed, we would run our test. If test fails, we deployed something wrong to production. So now we actually can know in advance that, and I'll actually show an exact example of that. We also want to have a better way to monitor production. At the moment, we use something called like order monitoring or something like that, and it basically tries to check how much orders was placed in like a day or week's time and compared it to now, and it's not very reliable. So we would replace that with this as long as it will become reliable enough. Also, previously regression tests were written with JMeter, and developers didn't know how to do it. It required extra tooling. So now we're actually shifting this responsibility to developers. And developer would be the one who needs to actually write that test and maintain that test. Because what previously happened, test fails and no one fixes them, because for the developer it feels like annoying. For tester, it's also not really his job. So yeah, now we are fixing this. And obviously trying to have as little as possible fake fails. So we were working on that still. It's not perfect, but we'll get there. Okay, so now how the project flow should look like. On high level, whenever we start a new project, we should create in Postman the collection with these tests. We can do this by simply copying existing one. Then when you do tickets, like there could be like a product details page and stuff like that, we need to make sure that appropriate tests in Postman is passing and also are actually written. Then we would always make sure that all these tests are run before we deploy to production. So if it doesn't pass, we would not deploy to production. And finally, like you mentioned, we should set up constant monitoring of production. So that's like a big picture how stuff should happen. And now we'll get into more details on each step, just in reverse order. So let's start with monitoring. So there are 4 channels on Slack. You feel free to join your squad one or all of them if you want to have more fun. And we at the moment schedule monitoring to run every 4 hours. And they never an error, and it would post Slack notification only if it fails. So successful runs obviously are not logged. An example of such a run would be this. Okay, so that's how it looks like in Slack. So we have these channels on my left, you probably can see, and then we have this. So something failed, it says it's failing, please check, and you can either check in DevOps, here to give this and summary here about that. It's not very clear, to be fair here. It is possible to see, obviously, but the best way to look at it is this report. That's why it's added here. So how it looks like. So let's download it. I would also recommend to use Firefox. I don't know why, but Chrome is not very happy with me opening this on Chrome. It's quite heavy files. You can see it's still loading. So I need to wait until it loads. I can't click anything. So it's still loading. Okay. Now it's finished loading. I can click around. The confusing part is if you click failed test, you will see failures, but you actually don't get any details about it. So you then see something failed. You see the test. If you click on total request and then scroll until you find exactly the same test, you get all the details you would want. You get exact URLs, you get exact response status codes, you get request headers, you get response headers, you get response body, and there would be also request body if you would have used, but this is a get request, so there isn't. Then obviously you can see all the tests for that particular request, and you can see that 3 of them passed, but 1 didn't. And it's kind of, I guess, self-explanatory. It says assert filters is not empty. And if you go to now this body and go to filters, you see that filters actually are blank. And that's why this test actually did fail. Oh, yes. Yeah, there's also, like I said, there's issue about some flaky tests. And sometimes you don't know in advance what it is. So I actually did create an Excel file, which is at the top of any monitoring channel here, like this. And if you open it, you can log stuff here, which happens. So sometimes, let's say you call PDP, you got 500 error. If it happened once, you basically can ignore it, but you don't know in advance if it happened before or not. So we can. The problem with testing is exactly that. Like sometimes something will fail. Even our own platform can return us 500 one time. So we need to know when we must improve our test or remove the test or something like that. That's why if something is repeatedly happens like this, then you finally know that you actually need to do something about it. You can't keep going. If it happened once, it's kind of fine, at least for now. So yeah. Yeah, and it's important to check every single failure, and we need to check them and get to a place where failures happens very rarely, and with each failure and each fix, it gets better. Also, important note is that not all BFCs so far has it, because we started doing this, then we already had some BFCs existing. I think we have like 5 or 6 BFCs which are actually using this, but any new one would need to have this. Okay. So that's about monitoring. We can move now to releases. So we need the ability to run the test basically on production, but not allow customers to use that production. So there's such thing as deployment slots in backend. And how it works is that you can have multiple number of slots, and you can tell how much traffic you want to send to one another. Like you can see in the top, there's production slot, and it says 100% traffic, which means all customers is going to this one. But when we actually deploy, we deploy to this deploy slot at the bottom, and we say we don't want to send any traffic to it, but it gives us this particular URL, which is basically our API, and we can access it directly, and we can feed this to our tests. So once we put it onto that deployment slot, then and we have that URL, we run Postman tests against it, and we validate if they failed or not. If they fail, we will post into another channel back in prod release. The same channel for all the squads. There's no reason to have separate one. And let's look again how it would look like. Okay, so how it actually works is, so this is where usual screen, you see your dev staging. We run these tests only against production deployment. So if I click on this one, you can see more or less human readable steps, what we are doing. We are deploying to that deploy slot. We prepare for Postman, and when Postman runs here, and it detects something is wrong, and because of that, we skip all these steps here. You can see them, they basically skip cancel. And this would be steps which would actually make deploy to be production. And because Postman failed, we actually didn't do here. And also, again, notifications for these looks identical how it looks like for monitoring failures, because it's literally the same report and everything the same. In this particular case, actually, it's quite interesting maybe to show why we actually want to run before we get to production. So if I open this one, again, let's do this. We can already see that this was an interesting run, like almost everything failed. Like failed test was 120% out of like 200 and something. In this case, what we did was we knew that Clevo is not production ready, so we used Clevo feature flag to run it only in dev. However, configuration required to have a valid HTTP link, otherwise our API crashes. So what's happening here that our API was not starting. So if we did not run this before we actually put it into production, that would mean that Liverpool would have stopped working for anyone else, because this is basically killed it. Yeah, and that's why it's important to run it before we get to production. Yeah. I guess that covers how releases works. Now we get to ticket flow. So probably most of you are aware that we have something called temp board. This is like this is templates for any project. So it would have all the tickets to launch a project. So it would have like PDP, PLP, wishlist, and stuff like that. So me and Simon already added tickets here for Postman setup and stuff like that. But that's only one part. Another part is that we need to make sure that you always have those tests in those tickets. So let's take a look at an example. So this is temp board. This is actually not backend ticket, because backend tickets doesn't work like that. Like once you set a backend, everything should start working, PLP, PDP, and stuff like that, so we don't have separate ones. So we actually did this on iOS. So if you scroll to the bottom, now every template ticket will have something like this, Postman. And since instructions of how to create these tests would say, please copy from true religion, so you would already have structure which would have this particular test. And it also mentions, in case there's any custom data returned as like that, it should also be added to Postman. So now all tickets in temp board already will have these. So that's a good start. But we also create tickets outside temp board. So I'll just remind you that current procedure without any of these changes should be whenever a ticket is created, let's say we add a new endpoint, then before we close the ticket, a tester should have created JMeter regression test for you to test. We quite often skip this step as far as I'm aware and actually end up not creating those. I guess it depends on tester if there's more time or less time. So we still need to push for this finally to start happening. And this time, since it's the responsibility of the developer and the responsibility of a tester to tell the developer you forgot to do this, hopefully it will work, because there will be at least 2 people checking this. Oh, sorry. Yes. So yeah, so basically we need to always think that either in acceptance criteria it needs to be written no Postman test required, or we must add something there. If it's written nothing, then something is wrong, and tester should send that ticket either to BA or backend to add that test or tell that it's not needed there. Also, this obviously will cause some test duplications, because some tests you write in C# and some in Postman. So just to be aware that not everything needs to be tested in Postman. So for example, if you add new feature like a new endpoint, or add something like reviews to PDP. Obviously, you need to add a test in Postman which verifies that that endpoint returns something meaningful, and that PDP, let's say, would be returning reviews. But let's say you're doing backend some generic logic change, like you change how Liverpool pricing is calculated using different exchange endpoint and stuff like that. In that case, Postman test is not required because Postman wouldn't really be able to validate if you calculated it correctly or incorrectly. Postman can validate that yes, price is returned, current price is not more than bus price and so on, but it cannot check everything. So in that case, it would be only C# test which checks calculations. Does that make sense that we have different categories of the tests and not everything needs to go to Postman? Okay, I see people nodding. So
Yes,
it's good. So I guess with time and experience, it will become more clear where we need to add and when it's failing, because I assume sometimes we might try to add a bit too much and then see that it's like failing, and we will just try to, and we maybe even remove it a bit later. So with experience, it will get much better. Yeah, so now I kind of mentioned already this, but this is like a list of responsibilities. So now the developer is the one who should create and maintain and should add new cases. Our tester should make sure that both acceptance criteria either mention Postman or says they are not needed at all. And he's the one to make sure that they would pass. So tester will still run those tests and see them if it works and stuff like that. Because he would be the one who actually validates that the developer didn't just pretend he ran it, and he didn't. Right? And yeah, since BAs are the ones creating tickets, they should be the ones putting that acceptance criteria. They could either ask developer, or they could just, with experience, also know if it requires or no Postman. There's, I would by default assume it always requires unless someone says it's not required. So that's a bit of a shift. I also know that some testers actually did create these tests and they do maintain and help them, which is totally fine. But yeah, final responsibility will be always developer fault if it's not added there. So just something to remember. And yeah, testers, yeah, like I said, can use this to check if production is still working, or if it's fine in depth and staging. The same, like we run this on production for monitoring and for deployments, but the same test can be run on any environment to check if everything is fine there. It's just that they will be more flaky because the environment more often returns failures and data are much more bad. Okay, before we go to recap, it's worth mentioning some of the limitations we currently have. So if there's a customer who has multiple apps, I think Revolution Beauty is an example of that. When you have different countries and you have different apps, at the moment, we would set up monitoring and the pre-deployment test only for one app. We also still get quite a few failures. Just today, actually, me and Nikki and Adeline did some investigations, and we raised support to Postman because sometimes we just do not get environment back and we just get error log that our test failed. Yeah, like I mentioned, we are monitoring only production. So previously we would always run, when we used to deploy, we would have dev and we run regression tests, we have staging, we run staging tests, but those almost always would end up being red and just people would just start ignoring. So now we're actually running this only on production. Which means if it failed, like something is actually wrong, like it would have failed for actual user most of the time. And yeah, and another ticket which is still standing, if release fails due to tests and then you fix tests, you cannot re-release it. You actually need to make a new release. So we'll try to fix this one. Not sure how hard it will be, but for now, keep in mind, if tests fail, you will actually need to make a new release, which is a bit annoying as you will need to deploy manually to dev, staging, and then only to try it to prod. Okay, so this is just a quick recap. How we do this. Does anyone have any questions about the flows? Who's responsible for what and stuff like that? Okay. I guess it means everything is clear. and we can move on to a bit more technical details, I guess. So let's try to run some tests. I'll open Postman. So like I said, I will not explain very detailed how stuff works. It's more like overview. Like if you want like details how to actually developer would write this, like we need to use these links and other documentation I showed, which mentions the naming conventions and stuff like that. So yes, so let's take a look at Liverpool. Yeah, so that's how it looks like. So it's called Liverpool-automated end-to-end tests. Oh yeah, it shows. We have always at least 4 environments. In this case, we also have this. So this is that environment which allows us to do that pre-deploy monitoring. And if you go to here and we'll try to see the URL, we can see that it uses that particular deploy one. So that's how it works. So prod and slot are literally copy of each other. The only difference is that particular URL. It's a bit silly we need to do that, but there's no better way. Now, for test itself, we originally used to have 2 collections for iOS and Android in JMeter. We still have them. Some of them basically is duplication, but at the same time, we also do cache things like settings separately, and even requests are different. And it's good just in case. It's much better to actually have both apps to run, because there is some differences sometimes. So we have, it kind of repeats, but you need them. Yeah. Okay. So let's open simple test to look at it. So that's the most simple one. So we have banners endpoint. We don't have a body or anything. Like we just have headers, and all it does is it's kind of like easy to read. Like it says this is the test name. So that's what you would see in the reports. The test for this would say it's iOS banners, and the test status code is 200. And all it does, it says the response must have status 200. If it's not 200, like this test will fail. The next test says banners array is not empty. All it does, it converts the response to a JSON data and just says that, checks that there's more than one element. I guess technically checks not equal 0, but yeah, it cannot be negative. So yeah, it checks basically is more than 0. To run it, oh yeah, important part is that the order of these requests do matter. You cannot just go randomly and just run this test, because it will not know what card to delete. It will not know what headers to use and so like that. So for example, we can see that first request in account is guest token. So once it gets token, it will set guest token variable to be guest token, and then login user is able to actually, sorry, not here, actually to use that token. And then once it logins, then it can actually go further step and try to refresh logged in user's token. So the order of each request does matter. You basically need to run all of them to get consistent results, unless you run them all before. Otherwise, you can't just run one. For stores, obviously, it's fine because there's no dependencies. You can just run. It's fine. It will just work. And tests would be like here. It would be showed here. It's passing or not. For banners, obviously, it's fine. You can just run it. And again, tests will be showing. So the tests are matching what you see in the top. What else? Okay. Oh, yeah, we forgot to actually run it. So yeah, so if you want to run it, we can click here. We make sure we select the correct environment. Also, if you want to see the request bodies and stuff like that, we need to click this. By default, somehow it's not clicked. So if you just run it without this, you won't be able to see what the bodies here. You can also unselect or select, but it doesn't matter. Yeah, so if I click run, it will just start running. And in the top, it keeps updating how many parts and so on. I'll stop this one and just go to the already finished one. So once it's finished, you will just have full list of stuff. And yeah, if you want to look at something, you can look here Okay, so this is you can respond to audience slide, so you can see here what's happening. Yes, I guess that covers first run. Yeah. So one can, first of all, can see the history. So if you, again, so Postman supports quite a bit of features like GitHub. It supports history, comparison. It even supports forking and also pull requests. It does support all that. I'll just show you. So if you go to history, it will be more or less similar like how it looks like in GitHub. So if I click this, you can, this is literally like GitHub. It says, I changed, I removed this, I added this. So if something is happening, you can easily check if something changed something or not. Also, important thing to note is that this collection is constantly used for production monitoring. So if you just add the test here, like this, and you just click save, suddenly the production monitoring will stop working because you cannot just edit the test here because it's the same. So what you should do is you can just make a fork. So if you create a fork, okay, so now you have all these requests and you can change whatever you want. Let's just change one, just an example. And you can have this until it's ready to be merged, because let's say you added a new feature which checks for an endpoint, but it's not deployed to production, so you cannot merge this until you actually ready to deploy to production. So let's say we change this to, say, blank. I'll save this. Yeah, I can just create pull request. Like I said, it's very similar to GitHub. I think you can also merge maybe before this, but let's just create how this. It shows all the changes I did. You can clearly see the only change is this one. It's even possible to require approvals and stuff like that, but I don't think we need to do that. And we can just merge. If I click merge, it allows me to say, to select what I want. And yeah, if I do this, it will just merge it. Yeah, and now that change was in banners. If I go banners, yeah, now it's blank instead of empty. I can just go back. Yeah, so I guess that's how the process for changes would be. Yeah, so far. Oh, yeah, and also obviously this is graphical interface, so DevOps couldn't be using that. So there's a command tool called new one, which does exactly the same but from command line. And that's what we use in to actually run those tests in command line. You can run it also locally, but yeah, we usually just use it in DevOps. Yes. So just quick overview how the setup is in DevOps. Again, like for full instructions, like we need to go to components page. This is just overview. So we just go to this. As usual, we have a library with all the variables. And you can notice that we also have release Postman variables. And that's what makes everything work here. And it's kind of self-explanatory. We need API key. We need collection ID. Collection is this thing here. That's the collection. We need to have environment ID. Environment ID is one of these. And you can see we have actually two, because prod one is used when we monitor it on schedule, and preprod is used when we want to run tests before deploying to prod. So we have two. Yeah, that's more or less covers everything I want them to say. So yeah, the takeaways would be that the developer needs to start any new project with Postman tests and keep writing them. BA should make sure that exception criteria includes that. And yeah, testers, again, should make sure that they are there and that they are actually passing. And finally, each squad needs to monitor its own channel. So we have 3 channels. Each squad needs to monitor its own. I suggest to use emoji to mark when we checked something. If it's flaky test or failed first time, just log it to Excel or try to fix if you know something is wrong with it. The more we update this, the more reliable it will become. Yeah, and yeah, all the details will go on this link. And if someone wants even more demo, there's one from older one from backend steering meeting. Yeah, any questions?
Yes, I do have one. I'm wondering, can we apply some kind of save around Postman when making changes? Because it also could be that someone says something not intentionally, but like when he clicked to close the tab, then he hit save.
Yeah,
and then this gets added to production. So like forcing like some kind of PRs to have an approval.
Actually, I don't know this. I don't think we are capable to actually have roles. This is a good question, but I don't know if it's actually possible. Yeah, but I guess, yeah, I don't know. But if it failed and something seems weird, we would be able to at least check who changed last and when. So in theory, we would be able to identify if it's due to recent change or not.
But Bob, did you not just said that so we shouldn't touch these collections and always make a fork? Even if you want to play with it, just make a fork. So if we follow that rule, we actually are not supposed to touch these collections, isn't it?
Yes.
Even
Did
if
they say anything not like that?
No, because if I'm not wrong, Mikhail just asked what if incidents happen and accidentally you save something that you want to save, but if you want to play with a certain collection, you just said earlier that we just need to make a fork and then do whatever changes you want. Then you won't ever touch the master. So
yeah,
that is true. He talks about accidents, and accident could happen. So I said if suddenly collections stop working, I said you can go try and look at maybe history and see if someone recently changed something, because I don't know how to block it. I might try to find a way, but it also be that it's not actually possible to block because it's not really GitHub. It kind of looks a bit like that, but it's not GitHub, so I don't know.
I have another question for you.
Yeah, sure.
I wonder, you just said that we have to, developer is responsible to make this Postman additional tests. And
Yes.
basically when there is an endpoint, we have to validate the response, whether it matches with our expectations. But are we not duplicating the same thing that we do with the integration tests?
I did mention that some of that will be duplicated.
Sorry,
yes.
if I asking the question. I just came into the
it's a good
session
question,
a little bit
yes,
later.
We will duplicate some of that, but it's not possible to do it otherwise because we cannot. Like we will need to duplicate some. Yes.
Sure. And then the next question, maybe you host or answer to that, but I just wonder. So first we do our task with finishing the ticket, we do the integration test, PR, merge, and then we have to validate on development whether the Postman collection works and add the new test, or it's not like that. I mean, when we're creating the new Postman tests, while we're developing, before we merge the PR to development, and we have to first merge the PR to the development so that we run the test, see we didn't break anything, and then add the new test.
Any new test which requires a new endpoint to be in production can be merged only and only once we basically released it or about to release it.
Really?
Yeah,
Oh.
because these tests are running against production. So if you merge anything into it,
Okay.
it will. So yeah, if you merge anything and endpoint is not in production, it will not work.
Good. So it's only for production. It's not something to validate, for example, in development. You just said that the environment are not very stable there, but it was kind of like a good idea. If you do a major refactoring, for example, like migration to something, this test will be quite helpful for the developers, because we usually do not have a very good coverage with integration or unit tests.
So yes, so these tests can be run on any environment. The only thing is that they will fail more often on different environments. So if it fails, you will need to rerun and make sure that part is working. Also, if you're making a ticket and tester is checking in depth, tester will request you to have a test ready for that your new endpoint, that he would also be able to validate that it's working and that you wrote the test.
I see.
Yeah, just you cannot merge until it's ready for production. So there is a bit of friction here, and we'll see how it goes. Like, this is basically more or less new thing, so we'll see how it goes.
My other concern is what about the estimation that we're giving to the clients? Because now this is like an extra time and extra work. And because we all are new in that, we need some time of learning curve. And you have more experience, so I just want to ask you how this goes with the clients, because
okay. So again, sorry, I keep saying again. Sorry, I'm not saying like that's always sound bad. So the procedure, like, let's assume there is no Postman test, nothing here. The procedure already is that the tester must write JMeter test every single time you have new endpoint or new feature. It's just that this is not happening. So in theory, our estimations already should have included. So from client perspective, nothing should have changed, except we will start actually doing this. But I agree, it will take extra development time. So
sometimes the estimations are already placed and you cannot change it. They're just giving you the estimations.
I'm pretty sure the new rules will say that if developer is not this is not connected to this, but I already know that in the background what's happening is that if you have a ticket and you did not participate in estimation, you will actually be required to re-estimate. So this will be solved. But yes, estimation is always a big. I don't think it's actually connected to Postman. It's about estimation. So when we estimate, we need to estimate that it will take time to release that ticket. We need to estimate that there will be some bugs reported. We need to estimate that we will not be able to work on it all the time. No, we cannot exactly, but we can approximate. And the same is here. We will just need to estimate that we will need like half an hour or an hour to add one more endpoint here. So maybe the first one will be slow, like you said, but once you did one, like a basic one, like just to check that something returns, it's quite easy. You just duplicate it.
Yeah, that's easy. Yeah.
So some of the tests will be harder, obviously, but it shouldn't be adding a lot of extra time. And also from client perspective, if we are able to break their production less often, if we are able to monitoring is much better, like in the end, we actually ourselves would be saving more time. Like that Liverpool example, we would have break and everything, but we didn't. So
yes, I have no doubt in that. I really like the idea. The problem is that we need, I had only those questions around my head. How we can now start influencing this good thing into to existing clients and telling them, look, guys, it's just a matter of a talk with them, I guess.
Yeah, so we do this for any new client. For previous one, it's more like a migration. We need to add these tests in basically like migration, because we don't have it. So yeah.
I think that we deleted the JMeter's pipeline for a client. Nikki, can you remember which one we did for revenue? Is that a problem? Yeah, we deleted the JMeter tests.
So, but it's good because he probably replaced the Postman.
Yes, we did replace it, but
you still
just
on mute,
said
Nikki.
that.
You still on mute, Nikki.
Yeah. We created the Postman collection for revenue, so we had to remove the JMeter because there was no point of running the same tests twice on JMeter and on Postman. So-
Yeah,
Yes,
it is
I agree
replacement.
with you, but I've heard from you, Pov, that you kind of said that, well, it's good sometimes to keep both. Or I misunderstood you.
It might be in situation where we had a regression test for not a particular client, maybe, but
I see. Okay.
something like, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, in this case, I guess before deleting, we should make sure that any JMeter test already exists in this one and then just delete. Yeah.
Oh, I am sure that Nikki already did that.
Yeah, sorry guys, I think it's good to keep the JMeter suite in case of like load tests or
Oh,
something like
yes.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think Lotus actually, yeah, I think Simon already picked on that one as well. Like, yeah, I think the only thing we cannot do on Postman is load testing. But
Then
for
we
load
have to
testing, we don't
revert
need.
it.
But for load testing, we don't need every single test we have here. I think for load testing, we usually do just a few requests because we need to know which product is available and stuff like that. So it's a bit, yeah, Postman will not replace that.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's good to know because, yeah, we didn't
Yeah,
know
great
about the
questions.
load test.
Yeah, and also
We don't- Sorry, go on.
Yeah, I was saying that also the load testing one does have a different structure from the normal regression suite. So they are anyways, sometimes they are in separate repo, or anyways, they are in separate JMeter file. So, I mean, we can get rid of the regression one, but we can keep the other.
Yes.
sounds very good.
Yeah, maybe we need to do now that for the client that we took everything off.
Yeah, I mean, I don't delete that. I don't wipe the tests. We just remove them from running on the pipeline, but the tests are still in GitHub. I mean, the repository is there, so the tests
Yes.
are there. So
I just said that we took it off. I said that we deleted from the pipeline.
yeah, but we don't need them on the pipeline for the load test if we need to do a load test. So
I see.
Okay, any other questions?
but this
I need to go just to say thank you, Pov.
No problem.
these slot deployments, they're possible only for BFC clients, right? I mean, old clients like Arden, because I have a Postman collection for Arden, but they're not BFC. So at the moment, we will use them only for production monitoring.
So the problem is not the deployment slots. The problem is that the routing. So when we have clients RDing, if there's at least one call which is not clients RDing, then we cannot do it. So for example, like hot topic, it will have clients hot topic checkout, so we can route this, but it would also have dev POC IO products. There's no client hot topic anymore. So in that case, that's why we can only this to do reliably for BFCs, because we can replace that routing easily.
Okay.
So the technology is the same for actual release, but like we can't do until we get, until every single call has that client RDing thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know, maybe Arduino already does that. So if it does, it would be possible. But actually, from top of my head, I don't know.
No, it does that only for the native checkout, but not.
Yeah,
for
so then it's not possible. Yeah.
PDP wishlist. These are all on the old structure. So yeah. Okay.
Okay. I guess we're also a bit running over. That's why everyone is dropping. So I know. Is there any final question? Maybe. If no, then okay. Then perfect. Thank you everyone for coming. If someone wants recording to be available, I'll also send the slides there, which have that link for Postman. So like I said, anyone who wants to actually write it, it's detailed, it's explained in details in those links. Like this was just overview. Thank you guys.
Thanks.
Bye bye.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.